No curriculum, no stress. Just natural learning. But does it actually work? The results just might shock you. I'm Janae Daniels, and welcome to the School to Homeschool podcast.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I am very excited today to have the author of Living Homeschool create a learning environment tailored to you and your children, which is so good today. This is Trece Davis. She is the mother of 8 children. She's been homeschooling y'all for 32 years, and the last one is about to graduate after 32 years. And she hails from my beloved, blessed home state of Texas. So, Trece, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, and it's so fun to talk to an original homeschooler, like where you fought for the laws and, you know, did it without a million curriculums and just trying to figure things out. So thank you for being the giants that we can stand on your shoulders. So thank you. Okay, so first, what made you decide to start homeschooling, especially back in the day when it was not a thing yet?
Right. I grew up in Wisconsin and never had heard of it ever, actually. And we moved to Virginia shortly, right around the time we got married, and we started going to a church that was like a homeschool hub. We had no idea about that, but we started noticing all these families, and the kids were so interactive with their parents and extremely well behaved. Mm-hmm. And we babysat for some of them, and we started realizing these kids are like top notch. What is the difference? And there we found out, oh, we homeschool. Lots and lots of homeschoolers in that church. So yeah, we observed and we said, we want this. Whatever they're doing, that's what we want, how we want to raise our kids.
Wow. So then how old was your oldest at the time when?
Oh, that was right as we got married. So we didn't even have kids yet.
Gotcha.
And then one of those couples gave us a book that was very instrumental, what the Bible says about child training. And I was like, I didn't even know the Bible said anything about child training, you know? So we read that kind of as like our first parenting anything. But mostly it was just watching these families, how they interacted with their kids, how the kids really respected their parents, but also how the parents genuinely viewed their kids as whole people and not just an annoyance or whatever. We really appreciated the value that they put on their kids, and they really listened to them. So yeah, so we had no kids at that time. And then by the time we started homeschooling, we had moved to Texas. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have any of them around anymore. But we did connect with a brand new homeschool group in the town we moved to. And so then I started learning from all of these, seasoned homeschoolers. Whoa, she's got a middle school child. Oh, how does she do it? And just started observing, listening to their conversations. I can remember, honestly, one of the early meetings, the ladies were all sitting around talking about, what do you use for phonics? What do you use for phonics? And they thankfully didn't ask me because I didn't even know what phonics was. I thought to myself, I don't know what they're talking about. I just know I need to teach my kid how to read somehow. So that's where I was at, ground zero, knew absolutely nothing.
Okay, so you meet with these moms, they talk about phonics. Like, how did you start? Like, what resources did you use? What did you do?
Well, again, I'm not sure I recommend this, but I just started with, all right, I know we can start with just simple words, like 3-letter words. And I just started going through the alphabet. What word starts with the letter B and maybe has an A in the middle and then has a different consonant at the end? So I just said bad, bat, all these different, it was a very organic way of learning myself. Mm-hmm. And I think in that whole process, I was learning to understand our language. I was the one receiving the education. So incrementally, I taught my son how to sound those words out. And that by the time our second one came around, I discovered a wonderful set of readers that did the exact same thing. And I thought, okay, I can trust this. I understand it now. So that's really what we did then from that point on. They would have little sample words and then little stories that use those words. And it really was just a matter of giving their brains a little time to be exposed to those things. And very naturally, they learned it, and all at different rates. Like you said, we have 8 kids. Some were ready for those readers at age 4, and some were struggling at age 7. They're all different, boys versus girls as well, but also just different giftings. And so there was a point early on where my husband heard another little boy reading fluently, and he was 5. And he's like, Trece, why isn't our son reading like that? And I said, he's not ready yet. He's not ready. You don't have to worry. You don't need to compare. And that's something I would still say to parents whose kids are maybe 5 or 6, especially parents of boys. Their brains need to be ready. And that's not something you can rush. It's just going to cause a lot of frustration and anxiety. And there's no need. They will eventually get it. So learning to, just continually expose them to a variety of things, but not having these expectations. Oh, they're in kindergarten. They should be reading blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that's valuable, especially now we have the research out of that pushing academics too early is detrimental in the long run. And yet I still see on Facebook pages, like yesterday, a young mom had a 2-year-old and she's like, oh, what curriculum should I get for my 2-year-old? I'm like,
Right.
read to them, read and
Exactly.
let them play,
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of, sometimes pressure that people put on themselves, probably because, oh, what are my in-laws going to say? Or are they going to think I'm failing their grandchild or neighbors or whoever? Oh, my kid is doing XYZ. But we really do need to appreciate where they're at and just take them step by step. And as you said, when they're very young, putting that kind of pressure on them really young is just not healthy. If a child is showing readiness, you will know, and you'll
Right.
feed that, right? Because
Right.
I was really concerned when my 4-year-old was like wanting to read, and I thought, oh, we can't be doing this. This is not good for her. But she was doing it on her own. I said,
Yeah.
well, and she's always been that way, just like a brilliant kid. So I'm like, well, it'd be wrong to hold her back too. So you just kind of have to gauge it with each one.
Well, yeah, it's true. It's true because I look at with my 6 kids, they are all so different. And whereas I have one child that like understands math and has had a mathematical brain forever, reading came a little bit later. Whereas other children, reading came a lot earlier. But when they were developmentally ready for each thing, they showed it,
Right.
like you could see that.
Right.
Granted, most of them went through public school at the beginning, but
So relaxing and not putting that kind of pressure on yourself or your child as a big recommendation, I would say.
I love that. So let's talk about. I love how you moved into doing more and more unit studies. Let's talk about how your homeschooling morphed over the years because I just find this super fascinating and really really cool, and your approach really cool. So
Oh, sure. So again, back in 1993, when we started, there were only like 3 curriculums out in the market. And I looked at those. I know it's hard to believe today. There's hundreds now. But
7,600 somebody counted.
wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. So, so at that time it was very limited and they were very traditional. And I looked at each one and I said, I can't do this. I feel like it's strangling me. It just felt so artificial. And I felt like it was sort of I'm trying to find the right word, sort of like an insult to my intelligence. They'd say, okay, now take a breath. Now say this sentence. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't live like that. And so I started sharing my frustration with a friend who, was the leader of this little group. And she said, well, why don't you create your own? And I said, can you do that?
Are you
She
allowed?
said, absolutely. Yeah, right. Well, are we allowed? And so she told me about this book, How to Create Your Own Unit Study by Valerie Bent. And I read that and I said, this is me. This fits me exactly. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And so I started looking at I had never even heard of unit studies, actually. So basically, I started looking at some samples of let's say, a unit study on ancient Rome, let's say, for example. And I looked through it and I said, well, there's a lot of busy work in there. They were trying to cover all the different subjects, government and literature and all of that. And I said, I think I get the idea, but I think I'd rather do it with the books I choose. Mm-hmm. And so we started going to the library and finding, let's say, looking up for a specific book that was maybe recommended in a homeschool catalog. And I would maybe find one or two of those titles, but there on the shelf were 20 more that I said, well, these all look really good. So I would check them all out, bring them home, look through them, and then just glean from them what I wanted to use. Mm-hmm. So we would make it as multi-sensory as possible. I had learned from that Valerie Bent book that the more senses you involve, the more retainable the information will be. So therefore, the longer that they'll remember it. And I thought, okay, that's a good thing, right? So I'm like, well, we could, let's say we're doing ancient Rome. We could make some of the food that they would prepare. We could don some togas. I'd take a flat bed sheet and the kids would put a little olive wreath on their head and I'm Socrates, I'm Aristotle. They were really fun. Actually, I think that's ancient Greek. Sorry. But they had a lot of fun dressing up like them. And then we would try to do different field trips. Mm-hmm. Let's say we were learning about the ancient aqueducts. Well, then we would go to, let's say, a modern day water treatment plant and try to see how things have changed over the years. We would study their artwork. We would try to replicate, whether it's mosaics or frescoes or weaving or anything. We tried to really do a lot of multisensory activities. Mm-hmm. We would certainly, the most important thing we did was read living history books, which is basically books that are fictional but are set in a time period where you feel like you're living there. And you immerse yourself in all of the different things that are going on. Another thing we would do is listen to the music or read the plays or poetry that was popular from that culture. We would always spend some time trying to understand their either mathematical contributions or scientific discoveries. And so it really encompassed all the different subjects. And I felt like at the end of a unit, each unit was a semester long. At the end of that semester, we had deep dived and immersed ourselves so much that our kids really got it. It wasn't, what I really was trying to avoid was, the textbook, you dip in, you learn 3 things, and you move on. Yeah. I didn't want it to be that way. I really wanted them to experience it. And so I feel that we really did that. We all really lived it, whether it was the ancient Mayan culture or Canada or African countries, Antarctica. We've just been all over the world with our studies. Some years we do more of like a world tour where we'll do 1 month we'll be in Australia, 1 month we'll be in Japan, 1 month the Middle East, that kind of thing, Russia, India. We've done all of those. And what I love about that is our kids grow to have an appreciation for different cultures because they're going to come across all of these cultures and different people that they meet now. You know, they all live on our street. We're at the grocery store with them. And I just really wanted my kids to have a heart for people who may not be exactly like them, but are still enough. They're humans and they're enough to appreciate and become friends with. And I just really wanted my kids to appreciate the beauty in every culture.
I love that. So, whereas I've heard some people use, like they'll choose a topic such as like butterflies or springtime, and then use that as the springboard into their unit studies.
Okay.
What was your main area of topic that you'd use as your springboards?
History, for sure.
History.
We started out doing those kind of, say, okay, unit study on horses or unit study on dinosaurs or big machinery. One day, our oldest son said, "Mom, I really want to learn about presidents." I was like, "Really? Okay."
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm ever going to hear somebody else ever say that, but great. So, and to this day, he's 37. He loves biographies of different presidents. I don't know. He was like 7 when he told me that. So we built our whole 1800s curriculum around the presidents. And that was kind of like the structure from where we began and launched each decade. I had another son who was crazy about penguins and still is to this day. So we spent a unit learning about Antarctica and incorporated the love of penguins into that. So everyone in the family, from pre-K up to 10th grade, we're all learning that one unit of whatever history or culture that we're studying. Of course, at different levels of difficulty. I had another son who said, "Mom, I'm just crazy about planets and outer space." And I said, okay, that fits in perfect with an ancient Mesopotamian because the Babylonians and Assyrians were really incredibly wise about astronomy. And of course, the ancient Greeks were too. So we fit that into those studies. So I tried to key in on their interests, definitely. And then I just got more and more comfortable, I think, with saying, okay, how about we study ancient China? We did that one for an entire year because it's so huge.
I was gonna say it's a long history and a lot of land.
Right. And it's so colorful. It's so fascinating. So within that year, okay, well, this daughter over here is really into making paper. Well, the ancient Chinese invented paper. So
That fit perfect.
so that was a phenomenal way to tie in and kind of connect her interest. Some of the kids are really into animals and, different ages. Okay, well, that fit in perfect with every single study we've done. You're studying Australia. Think of the unique animals that are only found in Australia. The kiwi bird or the kangaroo or there's a lot of actually koala, a lot of K animals in Australia, we came to find out. So trying to kind of find their interests, like one daughter, huge into fashion, loves fashion. When we studied the 1900s, she wanted to do a book where she would dress up in that particular decade's clothing. And she found all of the accessories, hats, umbrellas, shoes, did her hair that way. Because if you think about, let's say 1905, America was still in the Victorian age where it was full-length dresses, black, big hats. You showed no skin, basically. Then you look at the 1920s and we've got the flappers, the jazz age, where hair is cut short. You show a lot of skin for those days, sleeveless shirts, short dresses. And so she had a lot of fun with that. So trying to key in on their interests within a unit helped a lot. But I also wanted them to learn all the other things that they might not have necessarily been gravitating to begin with. just for a general knowledge type of thing.
I love it. Do you know, you bring up something interesting with your daughter and going through the decades. My degree was in costume design, and I had to study clothing history, and that's how they did it. They started with one time period, and we'd
I
have to
love it.
research it, and then we'd have to design, clothing based on it. And then when we went into the makeup, we'd be given, a time period, and we'd have to study the pictures and the paintings and the history behind it, and then recreate the makeup. So
I love it.
what you did, which is what you did with your daughter as college level work,
Cool.
because
Okay.
that's what I did in college to learn,
Oh,
how to do costume design. And that granted, that was like 3 classes of costume design, but still,
I
like
appreciate you
that's,
sharing that. I've never had anybody tell me that before, but it was a fabulous project
yeah.
that she totally took ownership of. And I still show that book when I mean, speaking in like homeschool groups,
Hmm.
and everybody's like, that's a fun idea. So,
Yeah.
just try to stay open
I love
mainly
it.
to what your kids are interested in and expand that and help them to develop it. Yeah.
What were some of the challenges over the years, as they were getting older and going into high school? What did you
Hmm.
find as some of the bigger challenges?
Well, there's always, I think it's less so much the academic as it is, I'm one mom and I've got 8 kids.
Hmm.
For me, it was time. Um, and I really made a big effort to be a mom first and a teacher second, or a guide or a mentor, or whatever you want to call yourself. Because I don't think I was teaching them so much as I was exposing them to what they could learn. But yeah, here I've got one going to driving us to his college orientation, and I've got a, a newborn in an infant seat in right behind him. Going, this feels a little surreal. All 3 of us went to his college orientation that day. So trying to meet the needs of them at all of the different levels. Um, I will say, before we started homeschooling, I broke down one day crying, saying, I, I'm going to have to teach high school chemistry one day. I was really afraid and having a meltdown. And my husband said, you know what? When we get to that, you'll know what to do. But you're only in kindergarten right now, Trece. Let's not worry about that now. And he was right. By the time we got to the high school years, I had a wonderful set of science to be taught from the book itself, like teaching textbooks or apologia, that contained all the information. I didn't need to know as much as oversee it and watch them kind of take ownership of it. And a lot of it was explained in the text itself. So I would say that was a it's a common fear. I think a lot of people are like, how am I going to do high school? I remember barely making it through high school, or I didn't complete high school. Some people will say, how can I teach high school? There's loads and loads of co-ops, loads and loads of online programs people can take. Absolutely. And what we have found to be a wonderful help is starting in 11th grade, our kids take dual enrollment classes at our local community college. And that just completely takes it off my shoulders. Um, that has been wonderful because then they're earning college credits at the same time as taking their 11th and 12th grade years. So the end of that, they've already got their transcript. The school has made the transcript for them, and then they transfer to four-year college. So all 8 of our kids have either already finished college, the first 6 have finished college, and the last 2 are in it currently, but had little to no help from me at all.
Wow.
So I felt like that was a really amazing thing. I remember thinking, my husband was like, well, it's time for our oldest to apply for college. I said, well, he'll never get in. And he was like, well, I think we should at least try.
Yeah.
And so we applied, and sure enough, he got in, and they were like, we'll help pay for lots of this. And we were just like amazed. I was amazed. My husband was like, well, of course he can go through college. He's a bright kid. He's done well so far. And what I learned when they started college, I was so encouraged that all of these years of, I guess, just building discipline in their lives, I never really thought of it at all, but they became responsible. They were in charge of when they had to turn in their homework, when they had to write their paper. It was incremental, and maybe that's why I never really put it together. But by the time they started college and were in college, all of their fellow students were like not even attending class, let alone turning in assignments or papers. And they were failing. And I'm like, wow, my daughters, they're all getting A's. And I'm like, I mean, they're not like Albert Einstein, but they were being diligent to do their work because they'd never known anything different. Of course I'm going to do it. So I was really encouraged that homeschooling, I think, really taught them that self-discipline and responsibility.
I found that my daughter, who's 17 and she's a junior, is doing concurrent enrollment. She took last year off, and then as a freshman, she did concurrent enrollment. And I was really, really worried about that because we pulled her in the, in just finishing sixth grade, and that was during the pandemic, and all the things. And I thought, oh, how's she going to do this? I mean, all we've had was the last couple of years with me, and yet she's like, oh yeah, I've got this assignment, I've got to get it done. She was pretty funny because she was like, wait a minute, if I do exactly what the teacher says and jump through all of their hoops, I get an A. I said, yes. And she's like, okay, I don't love that, but and here she is finishing up the semester, and
that's encouraging.
Most likely have A's. So, but I was surprised at how she just took the responsibility, and she's like, oh yeah, I've got this assignment to do. I didn't have to ask her.
Exactly.
They
take ownership.
Yes, they sure do. And she rose to the occasion with her peers, realizing that there was a couple people in her classes that were older than me. And she's like, oh, okay. And they're treating me as their equal, so I need to rise to the occasion.
That's beautiful.
That blew me away. So
she was ready. She was mature and ready to handle that. And I think they do. They do, generally speaking. And I think as they go along, I mean, I've had different ones who are saying, why do I need to take an English class? I can already know English. Like, it's just sort of basic, like, got to write papers. You'll be doing it all your life. And now they're like, oh yeah, obviously that was a very basic class, but they kind of, some of them kind of put up a little bit of a fight about it initially, but yeah, they grow into it.
I think so. I remember telling my mom when I was 14, she would do cooking schools during the summertime, and I'd have to help. And I was like, when am I ever going to use this stuff?
Right. Like every day.
Yeah. 3 times a day. That's adulting. What are you going to eat for the rest of your life? So let's talk about living homeschool. Actually, before we go into living homeschool, what are your kids doing now?
Okay. Our oldest is a senior statistician with Amazon.
Wow.
Our second is a designer with Apple out in San Francisco. He's like, Mom, I can't believe I get paid to do what I do. He was my kid that I was really worried about. Okay. I was like, he doesn't love math. He doesn't really enjoy reading. All he wants to do is computer stuff. I think this is bad for him, and I was like really worried. No, that's the way he's wired. I mean, that kid was always like that. And he's got a great personality. And I think he just kind of wove his way into people's hearts, and they trained him and taught him. Of course, he got a college degree as well, but he also said, yeah, a lot of what I've learned on the job. It's not so much my degree, but it gave me credibility. But he is the most creative person, and I think they see that. And obviously they see that. So, yeah, so he's at Apple. Our third son is a fire protection engineer down in Houston. And our fourth is a daughter. Our first daughter is a communications specialist out in Maryland. Our fifth is computer science here in the Dallas area. Our sixth is an ER nurse in Phoenix. And the last two, probably, number seven is probably going to be mechanical engineering. He's kind of deciding his major right now. Brilliant mathematician, but he's like, yeah, there's not a lot of money in that. So he's probably going to go into engineering. And our eighth, our last, is computer science for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's talk about Living Homeschool, which, y'all, this is such a good book. I think the story behind how it was developed is super cool and fascinating, and actually inspired me because I'm like, okay, I'm going to start journaling better. So can you share how you developed the Living Homeschool book?
Sure. My daughter, I've never wanted to write a book, never even considered it, never thought of it. My daughter-in-law had, they had I think a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at the time. And she said, Trece, how did you homeschool? Because she actually was raised being homeschooled as well. She says, my mom did it differently than you. We used textbooks pretty much. And she says, but Josiah keeps telling me how you homeschooled. And that sounds so cool. How did you do it? So I sort of explained it to her. And she says, I like that. Could you write that out for me? And I said, sure. So I just kind of gave her a little example of, let's say, an ancient Egypt study. And so I gave it to her. She read it. It was maybe probably 5 pages worth or something. And she said, now I get it. I love this. I said, okay, great. So you good to go, right? And she's like, no, I need more examples. I need more details. Could you do that same kind of thing with every one of the civilizations and cultures you've studied? I said, whoa, okay, that's going to take some time. So I went back through my journals, and it took me, I would only work on it in the month of June, because that was the only month I had where I could completely lose myself in it. And I would just go through all of my journals. At that time, it was 25 years worth. And look at all the books we read and all the activities we did. And it took me 6 years. But by the end of it, I had written this book. And I could see by that point, maybe more than just my daughter-in-law could benefit from this. And so, then we had a friend who did self-publishing, and my other son helped me design the cover. And so it just kind of came together. Another friend who's a phenomenal editor. So God provided lots of help for me. And here I am.
I love it. Okay, so one question that I've heard a lot, and this has been a hard question that I've not been able to answer, because when we started homeschooling, my youngest was 4 turning 5. And then I had 2 adult kids who had gone through public school. And so I had, teenagers and then an elementary and one about to go into elementary. But I hear often from young moms with littles, like, how do you do it? How do you balance? With 8 kids, what would you do? Especially when you had a baby in tow or several babies at once, what would you do?
Right. Well, one thing that really helped us was that we were all studying the same things. So we were all thinking about the same thing. And our lunch conversations, we'd be discussing, hey, what did you learn today? Hey, this is what I found out. And it was very, very exciting and very invigorating. So they were all kind of on the same page, understanding. The older ones would often work independently, always work independently. I'd say, hey, these are the books. Go tell me what you can find from those. The very youngest, of course, I wasn't doing as much, like the baby and the 3-year-old. And then I would be working one-on-one with, let's say, the 5-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old, 12, that range. And so then I would have one of them take turns playing with the 3-year-old. Could you go in the next room and read them some books while I help this child, kind of thing, with math. So we would do a lot of that where I always had helpers who I could call in. So they would do it kind of like in shifts. I would say for moms, let's say they've only got two, one's a 5-year-old and one's a 2-year-old, let's say, and you're really wanting to work on reading with that 5-year-old or something a little more brain intensive. Keeping that 2-year-old occupied is always a challenge. The 1 and 2-year-olds, they're busy, they don't understand what's going on, and you're their mommy. So I always tried to fill their tanks first, attention wise, read them some stories, and then set them at a little chair next to us with some snacks and some stickers and some watercolors or Play-Doh or whatever. And then we'd maybe have a 20-minute window where we could work with the 5-year-old kind of thing. So, I mean, it got increasingly easier for me as my kids got older because they could help me with that 2 and 3-year-old. I always say the 2-year-old is the variable in every equation. If they're having an awful day, you're going to have an awful day. If they're teething or they're tired or they're sick, be a mom and meet their needs and try to, make up for it when they're napping. And one day is not going to be the end of the world if you have to have a wash day kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, it's a balancing, juggling act a lot of days. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is homeschooling is not so much about the academics. It's a lifestyle and it's compassion, and your kids are watching and they're imitating everything I do. So I was really wanting to be, but often failing, wanting to be a patient, listening person in their lives, because I wanted that to be part of who they are. So just kind of stepping back from like a lot of the pressures of, we've got to get through this today, and just saying, we're going to live today. And that's why my book, Living Homeschool, I didn't want it to be something artificial. I didn't want it to be something dead. I wanted it to be life-giving.
Oh, I love that. And
truly where we're breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in the story, breathing back, what did we learn? It's really that simple. Let's read a book together and you tell me what you got out of it. And then write about it. I mean, it really, it can be very simple, but I wanted it to be genuine learning. So yeah, that's kind of how we did it with the littles.
I love it. Now, as far as like with math, would you ever go through curriculums with them, or would you stick to, okay, we're doing this unit study on Greece, and so we're gonna, study Pythagoras, Archimedes.
Right. We always had a separate math curriculum in addition to the unit study. Yeah, because there's just so many skills that I wanted them to learn incrementally. So yeah, we definitely used Key 2 Press, where the workbooks we love. It's published by Key Curriculum. They also have a very dynamic called Interactive Math Program, IMP, or IMP for short, for the high school years. I absolutely love, because it was story form. It was built off of real life examples. I loved it. But I kind of ran out of time to do it, because by the time I was there in high school, I had so many other kids that were under. So then we began more independent math work when they got to that age level. So we definitely still had a math curriculum, and starting in 5th grade, we'd also have a science curriculum. And our favorite was lyrical life science. And that, again, 5th through 7th grade, there are these topics that they put to music, really well done, very comical, but helps to remember it when you sing the little song over and over and over again. And lots of, stuff that they can investigate and deep dive into.
Very cool.
Yeah, so math and science, we had additional. But it also, I didn't feel so worried about it, because I was also touching on it within the unit studies as well.
Yeah, and I love what as you shared about the unit studies, and I've been reading in your book so for those of you listening, in the back of the book, she gives examples with all the different individual subjects and historical unit study examples, which are so great. But I love how integrated it is, where we get to see in real time, like, oh, this is how it all fit together. This is how the science and the math and the art all
Right.
created this culture, and added to it.
I think it laying that context, it helps them to understand it exactly as you said, to understand where they were in the human history and to appreciate the incredible things that they were able to figure out without calculators. you know?
I honestly think we die. If
Yeah.
if everything went down, we're in trouble.
Yeah, without the internet, without AI, they figured it out with their own brains. So that's really it develops a beautiful appreciation for what was discovered and how now we build off of that today and advance it much farther.
I love it. What would you give, last bit of advice that you'd give to homeschooling moms, especially newer homeschooling moms who've just pulled their kids, whether teenagers, elementary, middle school? What would you tell them?
The most valuable thing is your time with them. It's not the academics. It's helping them to become healthy human beings, and giving them that security, that unconditional love that, as a parent, you love them more than anyone else. You have more invested than anyone else, and you care more than anyone else that they are going to succeed. So you've got a lot of natural motivation already. So I'd say trust the fact that you're going to be learning right alongside of them. In fact, I am certain I was the primary student. It was not my kids. I was the one learning. I was finally getting an education. So, yeah, just develop your relationship and all of the other stuff will fall into place.
I love it. Trece, thank you so much for coming on today. The book is Living Homeschool, Create a Learning Environment Tailored to You and Your Children. I'll have a link to it in the show notes if you're interested in picking that up. Trece, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today. Mamas and
Thank you, Janae.
papas, oh, it is an honor and pleasure to have you. So, mamas and papas, grandmas and grandpas, you are doing so much better than you think you are, and you got this. We'll talk next week.
No curriculum, no stress, just natural learning. But does it actually work? The results just might shock you. I'm Janae Daniels, and welcome to the School to Homeschool podcast.